Welcome to another episode of Grief Healing for Moms. I am your host, Fabiana Batista, and I am a mom who suffered the loss of her, or the death of her 4-month-old baby, a few years ago. And through my grief journey and through my healing journey, I've created this podcast to create a space where moms can not only share their stories of their kids, their child's passing, but also what their healing journey was like. What worked for them? What didn't work for them? How were they able to get to a place of not only healing, but also where they can rediscover joy and happiness again? So with me today is a very special mom who endured the passing of her baby's during the passing of your baby's passing, essentially. This very strong mama went through the passing of her 14-month-old baby, Kaya, who we're going to be talking about today and honoring her short life and her story. And welcome, Johanna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good. I'm happy to be here and be able to share my Kaya's legacy and share a little bit about our story and our walk and our path and, the things that she endured so that it somewhat helps the mother that is walking behind me or the father or just a family member.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And before we jump into Kaya's story, what made you want to share your story with our viewers today?
So the reality is that my story is a bit different than others in the sense that Kaya was a surprise, right? We weren't expecting her. I have the honor of being a mother to 3 children, like you, and I have a 10 and a 5-year-old. And our 10 and 5-year-old, by God's grace, are healthy and well and filled with life. So when we got pregnant with our 3rd, we were like, okay, we'll roll with it. We always wanted more babies. Why not? Shortly after Kaya was born, we received a call from the state of Florida, and they shared with us that something on her newborn screening shared concern and that we had to bring her in for immediate testing. And I remember thinking, what? She's fine, because the first thing they said to us was like her T cells are low, and low T cells means you're more susceptible to infection. And I was like, no way, she's fine. Of course, my daughter was born in December, and I brought her home, and everyone had a runny nose, and everyone had boogers. And I was like, no, she's here like a champ. There's no way she has low T cells. And we brought her in, and they did testing, and she did have low T cells. And then that triggered more testing. And by the time Kaya was 5 weeks old, we had tested her. We had did a genetic panel, a whole genetic screening to try to identify what is causing these low T cells. And at that time, we discovered that Kaya had a rare genetic condition. At the time of her birth, she was one of 43 in the world. By the time she passed this last March of 2025, she was one of 96 in the world.
Wow.
So Kaya's condition was called SPLIS. Part of the reason that I want to advocate and share her story is because I don't want families to experience what we experience. Again, by God's grace, I'm a mother to 3, and my other 2 children are healthy and well. And no one said to me from the time I got pregnant with my first to the time I got pregnant with my 3rd, you should consider redoing genetic testing.
And that's the genetic testing that's usually done when we're pregnant, like that they do on the mom, right?
No, so
and the dad, right?
So no, this would be a different panel. Okay. This panel would be like, let's say you're purposely doing family planning and you're going to your OBGYN and they just want to check there's any genes of concern, because what we've learned is a lot of disease is caused by genetics, right?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I remember.
There's
I had
one
it done,
that they do at 16.
and there was an anomaly in
Right.
my genes, and then at that point they tested my husband to see if he had the same one, and then if the mom and the dad both have it, that's when it's a concern, right?
Yes.
In his case, he didn't have it, only me, so then it's fine. That's
right. But during pregnancy, I think they do the one that's more like common, where they check for like different more common conditions, because Kaya's condition was so rare, it wouldn't have shown on that panel.
Oh, so this is a different type.
Yeah. So, for example, with us, when we started exploring family planning and I was having conversations with my OBGYN in 2014, we did a whole genetic panel, right? A whole gene sequencing. And at that time, we had no genes of concern because Kaya's condition wasn't discovered until 2017. So even, again, God's grace, my two other children, had either one of them been born with this genetic condition, I wouldn't even be able to name it. No one would have been able to tell me why my children would have been experiencing what they are experiencing. So that to me was already evident of God's mercy, because at least in this sense with Kaya, I could name it.
Right.
And
you knew what was causing it. You knew where it was
Right.
coming from.
And I was able to, for me, something that empowers me in different ways is to learn, right? To educate myself, to try to understand the why behind something. And I remember that when obviously I was postpartum, we were 5 weeks out from just giving birth. And I remember one week my husband and I took Kaya to 15 different appointments. And every doctor that we spoke to just added something and added something else as gently as possible. But I remember I was just sitting across from them, and my family were Cuban. My husband's from Martinique, so they speak French. So I couldn't even say, why can't I understand? It's like they're speaking French to me, because I could understand a little bit of French, but nothing that they were saying to me was making sense to me. I was like, what do you mean? I don't understand. And I remember when Kaya, after one of those appointments, we came home and I really just got on my knees and I just said, God, if you sent her to me, help me help her, because I'm not understanding what these doctors are saying. Give me the wisdom, give me the clarity, help me. Right. And it was just such a prayer of sincerity for me. And it's not like a light turned on and all of a sudden, whoa, this makes so much sense. But the knot became less knotty in a sense. I was able to pull out a string and understand this one thing that we're saying. Okay, so I have to give her 7 medications at the beginning, right? And this is when she's like 5 weeks old. I have to introduce her to things. And I was just like, because I had 2 other children, I'm like, this isn't normal. This isn't normal. Lord, help me accept this is my normal right now, right? And it was like those little moment by moment steps of surrender, right? It helped me acknowledge that I wasn't going to do this by myself. I had, not only my husband, but I had my mother and my mother-in-law who stood in this immense gap alongside us. But then I also had the ideology that if I empower myself by learning, by trying to understand, then now I have this knowledge that I'm hopeful I could pass forward to another family. And if I could change one other family's, path by not knowing, just by sharing my story, then Kaya's legacy is one of power and not pity,
Definitely. So let's jump into the story. So you have her 5 weeks in, you go to the doctor.
Yes.
Well, that's when everything really started.
So after the newborn screening and we get the call from the state of Florida, we do go in and we do the first test. When they do the first test, they're just looking at the T cells. The T cell test comes back, and yes, it shows a level of concern. So she, at 2 weeks old, was hospitalized, and they had to give her what was IVIG therapy. So IVIG therapy is just basically antibodies that people donate via their plasma, via their blood, to basically just give her immune system a boost to be able to combat anything that's out there in the world, because any sort of infection at that point, or at any point in Kaya's life, would have been detrimental. So at 2 weeks old, we were in the hospital with her, and she was like on the bone marrow floor, and she was receiving IVIG therapy. This is why we still don't have a name to the condition at that point. After that, we did the genetic screening, and at 5 weeks old is when we get the results of the genetic screen. Oh. And that is what leads us down that path. Very early on, I remember sitting in the room with the doctors, and a resident who I don't believe meant any harm by it, but just gently turned to me and said, "We've never heard of this disease."
My God.
And I
It's
remember,
like, you don't want to hear, I don't want to hear that. Don't tell me that.
and I remember thinking, what? And again, I'm 6'2", and I remember this resident was probably like 5'1", 5'2", and I remember I just grew to like 8 feet tall in that moment. I was like, what? And the tone and the body language, I think it took her by surprise. And then she tried to clean it up, and she was like, well, these babies don't live past utero. And I go, what? And I go, well, she's here.
Worse. It's like, just stay quiet. Just stay quiet.
I know.
Don't say anything.
And I was like, well, she's here now. She's in my arms.
So fix it.
So what are we going to do? Right. And it became, I can't Google what doesn't exist. So I remember sitting beside Kaya and just saying, help me write the story. Help me help you. And that became one of the things that, was between Kaya and I. You'd learn alongside her. Everything was new. One of the things that this experience robbed from you, like once you're a first time mom, you have those jitters, right? And you're like, I don't know if I could do this. How am I going to do this? And then by the time that second child comes, you're like, I did this before, whatever. I'm not sleeping. I'm acclimated. But then with Kaya, like it stole that peace. It stole that security. It stole the ability to say, I know how to do this. I didn't know how to do this. And in that moment and in those moments, because it happened more than once, was my return to God, and God revived me. Meet me where I'm at. I don't know what the words are. I don't know what to do. Meet me where I'm at. Right. And, with his blessing, we were able to take Kaya home. Kaya, we were home for the first 5 months, and then she had a seizure, and the seizure lasted for about 5 minutes in our home. My husband had returned with our other daughter from swim practice, and my daughter, who was elated to be a big sister, was like, Mommy, can we take Kaya for a walk? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So we took Kaya for a walk just around the block because it was hot. And when we came back in the house, I laid Kaya down and I went to go give my 5-year-old a shower. And I remember I put my 5-year-old in the shower and she's getting wet or whatever from the shower. And I remember I heard very specifically from Kaya's room like a grunt. And I immediately knew that's not okay. Like something is happening. And I remember calling out to my husband and just saying, babe, can you please go check on her? And as soon as he turned the corner and I was walking in right behind him, he turned around and Kaya was just seizing.
Oh.
And I knew in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I just responded. I just picked up my phone and called 911 and I explained my daughter is seizing. We need to get her to the hospital, so on and so forth. And they came. And I remember when we first went home with Kaya from those 5 weeks appointments all the way to the 5-month, I used to cry because I had to give my daughter 5 medications a day.
Every day
To help her just, survive, honestly, from one day to another.
And these medications, this is what this team of doctors said. Once they figured out what the genetic condition was, that's what they recommended to keep her
kind of status quo, okay. Right? Because the condition affects a multitude of things. So it's called SPLIS, right? It has a longer name, but SPLIS is the acronym for it, and it affects the kidneys, right? So my daughter had end-stage kidney disease, which is what ended up causing the 5-minute seizure. She had adrenal and thyroid insufficiency, which means we had to give her medication for her thyroid levels to remain well. And then we had to give her adrenal medication because your cortisol, right? Your fight or flight. So you need to take that 3 times a day, to mimic what the body would actually produce on its own, right? When you have that fight or flight moment, your stress and non-stress levels naturally rise and go up and down. Because her body wasn't able to produce it, we would have to give it to her. So because she had a compromised immune system, we had to give her what is considered different medications for different antivirals, right? So you had to give her an antivirus, an antibacterial, and then one that basically covers everything.
Right.
And we had to do those like twice a day. So that ideology was I had to wake up at 3:00 in the morning to give her thyroid medication. And I was doing that more so than anything because I wanted to mimic, you had to give it between a time where she wasn't getting any food, but she was a newborn. Newborns eat every 4 hours. It's like, when is the perfect time? Okay, 3. So I'm up at 3 in the morning, giving her, lifting my 3-week-old's head, stuffing medicine in her mouth, putting her back down, you know? And it was an experience. And then at 5 months, she had the seizure and we went to the hospital. And I remember that the first doctor that walked into the room was her nephrologist, so her kidney doctor. And we had grown in a relationship because we knew one another since Kaya was 2 weeks old at that point. And I remember I just looked at her and I was like, what did I do wrong? Because I was so consumed by making sure, you know, my mind was, I'm giving her medications on time. We're wearing masks. I had my 5-year-old walking around the house wearing a mask, my 10-year-old, because they go to school. Kaya has a compromised immune system. How can we protect her? You know, like, I would kiss my baby through a mask because I was just so scared that I would give her something that would be detrimental to her. Right. And we just did our best to protect her. But I remember her nephrologist walked in and I was just like, what did I do wrong? And she just hugged me and looked at me and she goes, you did everything right. And that was the start of a 5-month hospital stay for us, where we had to combat blood pressures that were like literally 179 over 140 something for a 6-month-old. She went from 7 medications to 29 medications a day.
Wow.
We started dialysis because her kidneys completely shut down. So we had emergency interventions where we had to not only have a catheter place for the dialysis, but we also had to place a G-tube to be able to give her feeds. So it became one intervention after another where we consistently had to learn how to pivot. And I consistently had to return to my prayer of, God, give me the wisdom, help me understand how to help her. You know, she was at a wonderful hospital. She was at Holtz, and the team there is a team where, you know, there's residents and then there's the doctors, the main doctors who are teaching, you know, the new doctors that are coming up. And they would have their rounds every morning and every evening. And I basically moved into the hospital alongside, you know, my mother-in-law and my mother, who would shift change with me. My mother-in-law moved here from Martinique for a while to help us take care of Kaya. And she was in the hospital so that we could give my other 2 children a sense of normalcy, because it wasn't just affecting Kaya or me or my husband. It affected our entire family.
Of course. You know, at this point, you're living in the hospital.
Yeah, and it was to the point that, you know, my now 5-year-old daughter, she would be falling asleep with me right next to her, and she would say, I want mommy. Closing her eyes, falling asleep. And, you know, my now 10-year-old son, I would come home just to shower and change clothes to go back to the hospital, and he would just hug me. And there was just, you know, your firstborn is different, and there was just such an unspoken language of like, it's okay, mommy. You know, I miss you too. I miss you too, and it's okay. You know, and that offering of grace, even from my children so young, you know, empowers you to say, I can handle this next moment. I could take on this next moment. And it's what you would try to do, you know, just take on the next moment that came on. And
well, it's all you could do. I mean,
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
There's no other way to do it.
There's no other way. But what a beautiful moment that a 10-year-old can put his needs aside to say, it's okay, Mom. I know you're doing what you got to do. I miss you, but
Yes.
go to the hospital, go Do what you need to do.
And I think that's all a part of God's plan, right? To keep us so well surrounded in community, because I think the enemy wants nothing more than to believe, or you to believe. And when I say you, I'm referring to myself.
Yeah.
To believe it's only happening to you. This is only happening to you. It happens to no one else, right? And to isolate you. Being told one of 43 in the world, my goodness, that is isolation.
Yeah.
That is isolation. And that is like,
Yeah, because now the hope that, okay, fine.
I'm going to find 5 other people who have walked this and they're doing great.
What has worked for other people, now that kind of goes out the window.
But it didn't, because again, when that day that I got on my knees and I asked God, show me, if you sent her to me, it's because you see something in me that I do not know exists, right? Show me, how do I do this? And I jumped on good old Google and I started searching stuff. And, you know, one of the great things is being in higher ed as an administrator, having my degrees and stuff like that, I know how to research, you know? So I jumped on and I started looking, and I kept seeing this one researcher that kept showing up, you know, in relation to this condition. And every research article of hers that I read, all it kept saying is, these babies die, these babies die, and I was just like, okay. I sent her an email, petrified. I sent her an email, and my daughter was...
To the research doctor.
To the researcher. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was 6 weeks old at that time. And I said, I've been reading your articles. All of your articles say that these babies die in utero or die within the first year of life. I have my 6-week-old here with me. Help me help her. Mm-hmm. What do I do? Because I don't...
She responded?
Yes, she responded. And by God's grace, she made herself available to not only me, but also my daughter's team of specialists. And alongside one another, we learned a great deal. Kaya, my husband and I, very early on, made the decision that we wanted to help as much as we could, not only Kaya, but anyone else we could. Right. To not feel what we were feeling or experience what we were feeling. And because of that, Kaya did donate a great deal to medical research. Not only did she do blood draws, but she also did a cell line. So she did a punch biopsy when she was very young, obviously at my husband and I's decision making. And they created a cell line. So somewhat Kaya lives forever, you know. At the time of her passing, my husband and I did make the decision to allow an autopsy, a full autopsy to occur. And that was with the ideology that what they learn may help others. This researcher, she's wonderful, and she is working on a genetic therapy. It's just not available as yet, you know, and it's not available. It wasn't available to Kaya, but that doesn't mean...
But it wouldn't be... Maybe it wouldn't even be possible if it wasn't for Kaya.
Right.
A strong little warrior,
my little
baby.
Warrior baby. Yeah, and I mean, and that...
So when... Because we were... So she's 5 months when you guys had to go to the hospital. Now she's hospitalized for another 5 months.
Yeah, she's there till our wedding anniversary in October.
And her condition at this point is was it getting worse, or was it
she liked to
stable?
She liked to play with me, so she would take me on a roller coaster ride. One of the things very early on, and I didn't really understand why they said it to me, but when Kaya was hospitalized, the next day they called a family meeting, and I hated when they would call those family meetings because it's a certain level of PTSD. Like, just tell me what you want to tell me now. Right? And on the very first meeting, I remember that everyone went around the room, and the doctor that was sitting to my right of me, she introduced herself as palliative care. And I literally turned around and I was like...
As what?
Palliative care, right? So, and what they consider end of life care.
Right.
And I remember I turned to her and I was like, why are you here? Right?
Yeah.
Because, and she's like, well, you know, in the pediatric world, palliative care is not necessarily just end of life, right? It's also child services, support services, so music therapy, art therapy, different things in relation to how do we take care of the family as a whole, right? Which I was grateful for that again, because I'm a mother to 3 children. I'm a wife. So I did consistently have to think about the shared grief ideology. But one of the things they said to me in that meeting, which I was just like, what are you talking about? I walked in with my notes, right? Super prepared. Okay, so this is what Kaya's on. This is what we need to do. Blah, 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 blah. And they agreed with my notes. They were like, this makes sense, but let's see what Kaya does. And I was like, what do you mean, let's see what Kaya does? And what I learned to understand is the human body is a human body. I can give you everything, and you may not respond.
Yeah, my husband always says, because he's a registered nurse, he says 2 and 2 in medicine. 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4.
Right. And I learned that along the path, right? We can do everything right. That doesn't mean that her body will respond. And that, again, was another moment of surrender. There are so many experiences in life that remind us just how small we are, really, in the ideology of control and the grand scheme of things. And walking this path alongside my daughter was a consistent reminder that I have no control over anything. And God's grace is enough to carry me to the next moment. But that's where it ends, right? And in surrendering that and to asking God to be at the center of what I do and allow my words and my actions to be pleasing to you, I understand that I may be the only representation of a relationship with God that someone may allow into their lives. Mm-hmm. And I want to ensure that in walking this path with Kaya, that in surrendering to God, that I'm a good representation of that relationship.
Oh my gosh, you are. You are. There's no doubt about that. And I hope that you know that. Because you 100% are. From the moment that we met, that we started talking, that was like what you led with. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, that was powerful. I was like, it was impactful to me just getting to know you. So you definitely...
Yeah,
you're definitely a walking representation
of relationship and communion with him,
faith and of strength, and I love how whenever you talk about her, you make sure that you want to honor how much of a warrior she was.
Yeah.
So tell me about the 5 months in the hospital stay. Some things worked, some things didn't work. She would respond to some things, so some of the treatments, and some not to others. And then, so tell me what happens after those 5 months.
So during that
were you guys able to take her home?
We were, but during that 5 months, she was in the ICU for about off and on the whole 5 months, like up to like the week before we went home. But she was in the step down unit for like 2 months or a month and a half of it. And it was really just like routine care, understanding how to do the dialysis, understanding how to administer her medicine. But because SPLIS is a progressive disease, right? It was something where it affected her nervous system as well, right? So eventually what we started seeing was a manifestation of it affecting her nervous system. So right around the October mark, I noticed, and this is early October, I noticed that Kaya wasn't smiling at me anymore. I noticed that she wasn't tracking me.
Because at this point, she was around a year old, right?
No, getting to a year in Almost. December. Yeah, she would have been a year.
Okay. So about 10 months.
Yeah, exactly. So
which at this point, they're already like full blown smiling,
grabbing for things like that.
And she stopped doing that.
She wasn't tracking me when I walked in the room anymore. One of the SPLIS, unfortunately, also affects hearing. So Kaya had severe to profound hearing loss, but she would still manage to respond. You know, if you looked at her, she would still smile. She would still respond to you. So she had her ways of communicating. And I remember I went to the doctors and I told them that I wanted a neurology consult, because I saw something change.
Right.
And that was one of the blessings of being bedside, right? The opportunity to watch something's off.
Yeah.
It's no longer just mommy instinct. It's a distinct difference, right? And being able to go to her doctors and say something's different. And at that time, they had found, like, while she was in the ICU, so she got there month 5, let's say month 6, they found like a small lesion in her brain. And at that time, the lesion wasn't a lesion of concern, but it would dysregulate her body temperature. So she would like be fine. And all of a sudden she's like 103. And you're like, what? And there's no fever, no infection. And then she would drop right back down. Oh. And again, she liked to keep me on my toes. But then that lesion also would control body movement. So there came a point where Kaya was really excited, like all babies, about her fingers, right? All of a sudden, she didn't want to bring her fingers to her mouth. And then she had 3 days where she was just doing this continuously, like trying to bring her fingers to her mouth, but she couldn't bring them to her mouth. So she would like miss the mark the whole time. So again, they checked the lesion. Lesion looked exactly the same. It didn't look like it was an active bleed, but it was in a place in her brain where it would control those things, right? Body temperature, movement, things of that nature. And then we continued the path to going home, understanding that all we can do is kind of manage that, right? So we had a lot of medication for management, right? So Keppra was one of the ones that we would give her for management of those conditions. But then after that, there reached a point where she started getting sudden muscle spasms, but not like, you're swimming and all of a sudden you come out and you're like, oh my God, I need to stretch, like full body muscle spasms. And it was horrible to witness because it wasn't a muscle spasm that lasted like a second. It would go on for like 5 to 10 minutes at any time. And all I can do is hold her and try my best to comfort her, or, my mother-in-law, my mother at that time, the same ideology, or my husband, we would just try to comfort her.
Right.
But that was when we learned that the condition was affecting her brain even more. And it was one of those things that as she continued to progress, by the time we got her home in October, the muscle spasms, we had introduced another medication with the ideology like that at a low dose, it would help the muscles relax enough that where if the nervous system fires off, she wouldn't get these 5 to 10 minute muscle spasms. But then we kind of like turned another corner, and with Kaya, I always felt like my head was on like a swivel. I was just trying my best to keep up and pay attention, and ideology of, okay, I have to mix this formula with this and do this and give this medication and do this the right way. Well, her kidneys are stealing calcium. I have to give her more.
29 medications a day. That in itself is.
And that wasn't even like including her diet. Her diet was something that was also really challenging. But with everything that we had going on with her, like the only thing that I've envisioned when I think of Kaya is how much love she was surrounded with, how much love she gave. And there were moments of hardship, and there were moments of suffrage, and there were moments where I definitely would like go walk my neighborhood for like 4 miles, or go walk the hospital grounds for like miles on end, just because the quietness would try to consume me, right? And I just needed a distraction of being able to think in a place where I knew my feet were on the ground, I'm moving, I'm doing something, not just sitting bedside,
of course,
waiting for my daughter to like disappear, right? But then we turned another corner, and when SPLIS started affecting her brain, Kaya almost went into like a deep sleep. She was sleeping like 23 out of a 24-hour day.
Wow.
And she wasn't responding anymore. Like if you pinched her, she wouldn't respond. But if you would kiss her, she would respond. So to that, I'm grateful for God's mercy in that too, because he didn't let her feel pain, but he let her feel love. She always knew she was safe. She always knew she was loved. She always knew that she was wanted. I know that.
And this is already towards the end.
So this is like around November, right? And I like to envision that in those 23 hours that she was sleeping, I always called Kaya my Kaya girl, right? And that her and God were in deep conversation, and that God was probably saying, "Are you ready, Kaya girl?" And she would probably say, "Not yet." Not yet.
Sure that was the case.
Because they need a little more time. Not yet, because they're still trying, and we never stopped trying. But we also knew when our prayer transitioned from God heal her to God show your mercy, allow your will, which is greater than mine, to be done. And if that means calling Kaya home, then strengthen me for after the fact. Right. Strengthen me, Lord, so that I have 2 other children. And grief and joy, they all coexist. They all live in the same room with one another. Yeah. I could be sitting with my son laughing and my other daughter spinning in a corner somewhere, and grief is still in the room. But so is joy. And I want to acknowledge all those parts. I want to know that the puzzle of life continues to just unravel, and piece by piece becomes moment by moment what you experience, right? This conversation is a piece of the puzzle. Yeah. It's one that neither you nor I knew that God would allow to unfold and would happen. And just trusting that there's a reason for it.
So once she passed at home or at the hospital?
No, so she passed at the hospital. So I go to a church where they have the gift of prophecy, right? We live a living and speaking God. And while I was at church, I was sitting there and I had been reading the Psalms with Kaya every day. That's what I would do. I would read the Psalms with her, and my other daughter would be present too. And we would go through the Psalms, and I was opening my Bible and I was looking, what are we reading for that week? And I remember hearing, and once you learn to hear God, it's a very audible voice, right? It's the Holy Spirit having communion with you, having a relationship with you. I remember God saying to me, the day you read Psalm 23 to Kaya is the day I will call her home. And I remember I shut my Bible and I was like, no way, nope, that's not going to happen. I was like, Kaya's fine. By Kaya standards, oh my God, Kaya was fine.
Johanna.
And I remember...
Did you avoid reading getting to 23? Like, I'm going to skip it today,
Today's not the day.
Today's not the day, Lord.
No, actually I didn't, because I remember I went home and I was in the backyard, and it had to be like 10:30 at night, and I'm like sweeping, and my husband comes outside and he's like, what are you doing? It's 10:30 at night. And I'm like sweeping and I'm crying, and he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, everything is wrong. And he's like, elaborate.
The
and
meltdown.
I'm like, elaborate. And I'm like, nothing. And it was just because my heart had already accepted what I know to be true. We serve a God who cannot lie. God said to me, the day you read Psalm 23 to Kaya is the day I will call her home. And again, in perspective, what mercy? What more can you ask?
Were you ready when it came time to read it, or were you like, I don't want to read it?
No. So like, Kaya was fine that night. We did have at-home nurses that would help us because Kaya received medication around the clock. But we had set up our schedule with the nurses where we had period of time where it was just us as well. But it just so happened that this Monday night, our nurse wasn't able to come. So my mother-in-law and we divided shifts. So my mother-in-law stayed up with her. I went to bed like around, it had to be like 11. And my mother-in-law stayed up with her till like 4. And then I went in the room from 5 until the next nurse arrived at 10. When I went in the room with her, like around 5, she was on her peritoneal dialysis, which peritoneal dialysis specifically is like, it takes over the function of the kidney. So it fills the peritoneal with fluid, and it basically picks up whatever toxins are in the belly, what the kidney would naturally filtrate, right?
Okay.
It tries to mimic it as best as possible.
Okay.
And then it sits and dwells for like 30 minutes, and then it flushes it back out. And then it goes back in a new solution of dextrose, a clean version of the dextrose goes back into the peritoneum.
Okay.
And then it dwells again for 30 minutes, and it does this for 14 cycles, right? So Kaya's dialysis normally would start 7 o'clock at night, and then it would end somewhere around 8 or 9 the next morning, right?
Okay.
So when I went to her like at 5, I was like, oh, her breathing is kind of strange. Right?
And she's sleeping, because this is when she's sleeping 23 out of the 24
she's sleeping
hours.
23 out of the 24 hours. And I was like, her breathing is kind of strange. I could tell it was a little bit more labored, right? But again, you're getting fluid in your peritoneum. So sometimes it's just a requirement of an adjustment. You know, you move her a certain way and the breathing improves.
Right.
So I did that. I moved her a certain way because at this point, Kaya was also like, she lost the milestones that you would see children naturally would gain, but from being in the hospital for so long, and of course, and then when it started affecting her brain, she lost even more so the abilities for milestones. So it's like any position we would place her in, she would stay in. So I adjusted her, and I was like, okay, her breathing improved a little bit, and I just sat bedside. I got up and I did a few things in between, but always just like kind of circling back into the room. At 10 o'clock when the nurse arrived, she was still on dialysis. And I remember she walked in, and this nurse was wonderful. And I said to her, you know, her breathing is kind of strange to me, right? Let's just keep an eye on it. I'm just waiting for the dialysis to finish, to disconnect her, to try to get her out the crib and kind of move her around. And she was like, okay, no problem. When they come in, they have their own checklist of things that they have to do, right? Just to check.
Yeah.
So I went into the backyard at that time, and all of a sudden she comes running out, and she's like, we need to call an ambulance now. Kaya's oxygen, she just tanked down to 46 because I had put a reader on her finger because I was like, again, I thought her breathing was off, and I was like, what? And she was like, her oxygen just went, she used more nurse terms, but basically her oxygen level went down to 46. And again, I was like, okay. Again, keeping in mind what God had already told me. Mm-hmm. And we walked back in, we called the ambulance, they came, they did their own assessment. And, you know, the paramedic was like, well, you know, she seems to be breathing a little better. It is going up and down, but because she's not holding stat of 94, she didn't drop as low as 46 again while they were there. But while she's not holding stat 94, 96, I think it's better that we take her, especially because she's so medically complex, right? There's so many different things going on we don't know. So I said, sure, I'm not going to stand in the way of it. So we went and we took her, and I held her in the ambulance all the way over. And I remember that when I handed my daughter over, the weight felt different. It felt, she was too lax.
Okay.
She was too lax, and I remember that I saw them lay her on the table, and it was like, it's this memory that's imprinted, and I was just like, that doesn't look okay to me. And I unfortunately have seen many different medical procedures done to Kaya at that point. And I was like, that doesn't look okay to me. But they checked everything. All her labs came back fine. Mm-hmm. But they couldn't explain to me why her oxygen level was at what it was. And unfortunately, because we had been at the hospital for so long, you know, they all knew me. They all knew Kaya. And like one of the nurses that we have a good rapport with walked in, and she's like, Johanna, I don't think they're going to send you home. I think they want to keep you for observation. And I said, okay, that's fine, I'm not going to fight it. I said I want to do what's best for her, and if this is the environment, okay. Granted, we had just been in the hospital, right? Because it was one of those things that unfortunately, when you're so medically complex, it's like
Yeah.
you leave to come back, you leave to come back,
Right.
So we went into the step down unit because again, it was just for observation, and all her labs were normal. And I was there, and my mother-in-law had said at that time, she was like, "Oh, I'll stay." It was my mother-in-law, myself, and my husband. My mother-in-law would say, "I'll stay," because my other two children had to go to school in the morning. So, and my mother had to work. So my mother-in-law was like, "I'll stay. You guys can go home." My other two children were with my cousin at that time. So we were very well surrounded. We had a good community of people who were willing to step in and help. And for that, I'm forever grateful. So we left the hospital like maybe 1:30 in the morning. And we went to go pick up our other two children, bring them home, allow them to continue sleeping until the next morning. But at 4 a.m., the doctor for the step-down unit called me. And she was like, "Johanna, I told you I would call you if something happened." She's like, "Kaya's oxygen level went below 60 3 times. We managed to get her back, but we had to bag her, and she's in the ICU now. I think you and your husband should come back."
So you rush back.
So we rushed back to the hospital. My sister-in-law at that time had come to join us as well, so we were able to leave our two children at home with my sister-in-law. So we rushed back to the hospital, and now it's Tuesday morning. And they come in and they speak with us in the morning, and they share with us what we see is in line with a progression of the condition. And at this point, we have to ask you, if Kaya's heart were to stop, if Kaya was to stop breathing on her own, what do you want us to do? And thankfully, my husband and I have been very open with one another, very transparent. We have the ability to communicate about the good, hard things, right? That was one of my prayers to God too.
So what did you guys do? Or how did she end up passing at this point?
So we decided that no, we did not want resuscitation efforts, right? We did not want anyone pounding on her chest. We didn't want any of that. So we decided that we would just naturally allow her to go. We stopped all medical things. So anything like the dialysis was stopped, the medications were stopped, and we just surrounded her with love. We were just present with her. And we just held space. So this was on the Tuesday. And you saw how the condition continued to manifest in her body. She would just be laying there, and her oxygen would drop all the way down under 60, down to the 40s, and her heart rate would shoot up to like 175, but she wasn't in distress. Yeah. She was at peace. We hadn't given her any medication. Sometimes they give like different types of medications to try to keep them at peace, but we didn't do that. And she just slowly went ahead of us, and I remember the last few hours with her, or the last few minutes with her, the day that I read Psalm 23 is the day that she passed. I was laying in bed with her, and it was 2 a.m. and I noticed that her breathing was really labored. And I called the person, I can't think of the name right now, but the person at the hospital who basically does the treatments for breathing, the breathing person. And they came in, and I remember that they would suction Kaya and they would give her oxygen. And I'm laying right next to her, like I'm holding Kaya while they're doing this. But there's such peace in the room. And I really think it was just, again, God's mercy in that moment of allowing me to be present without really truly taking in everything that was happening, in a sense. But understanding what was happening. And all I could feel was peace And I remember that I was laying next to him, next to Kaya, holding her while the therapist would work. And I remember I would hear him in the dark just saying, breathe, baby. Come on, Kaya. Take a deep breath for me, baby. And I remember I would glance at the numbers and they would go low and then go right back up. Go low, go right back up.
Yeah.
And he did that from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Wow.
And at 6 a.m., he told me, Johanna, I'm right outside this door. If you need me, let me know. And she was fine. And then at 8 a.m., she did it again. Mm-hmm. And now it was a different therapist who came in and worked for 30 minutes. Because while I agreed to no interventions, I couldn't just allow my daughter to choke.
You wanted her to be comfortable.
I wanted her to be comfortable.
Of course.
And then she did it again at 10 a.m., but this time we didn't call anyone. My husband jumped on the bed and started to do the same thing the therapists were doing, suction, oxygen. And it was just this back and forth battle with her brain, because what was happening was the brain was basically communicating a signal, don't take a deep breath. Gotcha. Right? And so the lungs would respond. And when the lungs would respond, the heart would panic and her heart rate would shoot up. Right. And that's not the scientific version, but this is what we were seeing occur. So my husband did the same thing that the therapist did, right? And he would give her oxygen, suction, give her oxygen. And he did this for like 2 hours. And then he turned to me and he's like, did I do the right thing? And I was like, does it feel like you did the right thing? He's like, you did the right thing. You weren't going to allow your daughter to be in distress, right? And so after that, I read Psalm 23 to her. And at that time, we called, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother, my sister, my dad, everyone, Kaya's godparents, which are my cousins, my children came, and my other 2 children, they came. And we just surrounded her with love. And we prayed over her, and we sang, and we read, and we were just present. And then like around 4:30, we decided to go down the hall, which was equivalent to literally a hallway. So we weren't anywhere far, and Kaya was right in front of the nursing station. And my mother-in-law and my mom stayed in the room, and then with the idea that we would switch. Yeah. So at 4:45, Kaya's godmother, my cousin, went back into the room. And at 4:47, my phone rings, and she's like, I think you need to come. And so I jumped up, and everyone followed, and we all went back in the room, and we just surrounded her, and we just prayed, and we just sang, and we just asked for the Holy Spirit to allow her not to suffer. Right. She was posturizing a great deal, which is basically the brain was sending signals, and you would see her stiffen up and do involuntary movements and things of that nature. And, I just remember asking God, if it is that you're getting ready to take her, just let her go in a deep sleep. Yeah. And she was already in a deep sleep, right? And we just stayed there. And I remember that as her heart stopped, I remember crying and asking God, just one more minute. Just give me one more minute. And just like that, her heart started again. Wow. And I remember I just grabbed her and I just told her, Mommy will see you in a blink of an eye. You can go ahead. And that's really what it is. She hasn't left me.
No, she definitely hasn't.
She's just gone ahead of me.
Yeah.
And the ideology that brings peace.
Of course.
Because they're everywhere that we are. And, my other daughter talks about her Kaya girl all the time, and she speaks with her with so much love. And she also asks us questions about death, right? Because she's only 5. So it's a lot of repeating and a lot of understanding. And my 10-year-old the same way. And, we all have a relationship with God, our own individualized relationship. And I've never talked to my children or talked in the sense of you have to believe this way.
Oh, of course.
And my children have been able to establish their own rapport with God that I pray that as they get older is just strengthened
Yeah.
by life's experiences. The same for my husband. He has his own rapport. My mother-in-law, we all
Yeah,
just walk
everybody
this
has
path.
their own
Yeah,
relationship.
differently.
So talk to me about what was the lowest point and what helped you to start getting out of that point? Like what were some things that helped you as we hit rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
Besides, obviously, I know God is has been present throughout the entire thing.
Yes.
So what were some things, and it's more so that
Tangible
we can,
things.
so if somebody else has gone through, another mom has gone through a similar situation to yours, so that we can help them by giving them maybe some tools of like what worked for you.
Yeah. So tangible things that worked for me. I'm a true believer in using the tools that we have been given. One of the hardest parts of this path was not only learning of Kaya's condition, but also faced with the realization that, wait, this is genetic. And as we learned more about the condition, we learned that others who have experienced this condition that are a little older than Kaya, for some of them, it did not manifest at birth.
Oh, okay.
I have 2 other children.
Right.
And that fear almost consumed me. And my husband, I remember him very clearly and compassionately saying to me, we're going to test our other 2 children. And I remember thinking, no, we're not going to test them. I'm not going to do that. And we did test them. And by God's grace, like I said, they don't have the genetic condition, but I use the tools that God has given us, right? So not only did I speak to a therapist, but I told my therapist I need to speak to a psychotherapist, right? Because I understood that what I was experiencing was real. It was regurgitating thoughts. I was pacing at night. I was doing all these things. And she prescribed me something really low just to help me be able to get through that period of time. And I used it like the last 3 days while we waited for the results. But that's one of the things I use. I went to a therapist. I continue to speak to the therapist. I go to my Bible studies. But now in this period of grief, I've returned back to like lifting weights, going back to the gym, because it gives me something tangible, right? The grief of losing Kaya, that weight, it's mine. It's something that I carry.
Right.
But now lifting something heavy, something tangible, something that I could lift and hold, it makes me feel powerful in a different way. It gives me back control in what felt or continues to feel sometimes like an uncontrollable.
Right.
So those are my ways, right? I write a great deal. I read.
Like journaling.
Yes.
Okay.
I write a great deal. I write to myself. I write to God. I write to Kaya. Whatever is on my heart at that moment.
Okay.
I acknowledge the weight of the scar in my heart for having grown Kaya in my womb. Mm-hmm. But I'm grateful for it because I understand that that means that my love for her is forever.
No, and what a blessing that you got to meet her, that
Yes.
you got to see her smile.
Yes.
Even through
everything that we occurred.
Even
yes.
through all the hospitalization and the conditions, but just, like looking at
there's joy in both.
Right. Looking at least at the blessings, right?
Absolutely.
Amongst the chaos, but at least
Absolutely.
like those blessings, which some moms never get to
And I realize that as well.
meet
Even
their babies or
yeah.
or never get to hold them, never get to, or maybe if they do get to hold them, it's just for a few minutes and they never get to see them smile,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that being in the hospital system for so long with Kaya, like, it's so unfortunate that this club is not that unique. This ideology, again, that the enemy tries to get you to think that this is only your experience. It's not. And I acknowledge the fact that, yes, it is a joy to have carried my daughter, to have brought her into this world, to have the experience of her smile etched in my memory, right? And the warmth of her skin, or the ability to kiss her and hold her. But I also acknowledge that there's other families that don't get that. And, in my prayers, not only do I pray for my family, but I think of theirs as well. And I hope that part of her legacy is where I can avoid or help other families avoid experiencing some of this, just by continuing to spread the knowledge of having an understanding of our genetics, having those, I call them the good hard questions, asking people the good hard questions of like, what do I need to know? What am I missing before being told, hey, your child has
Before you actually give birth, and then now you have to go
you
through
have
everything
to,
you
yes,
went through.
even giving people the forewarning, like while they're pregnant, sometimes would make the difference of how a person, prepares for bringing a child that will or may have medical needs into the world. Removing the blow of the surprise, I think.
I agree. It's definitely not something that is talked about often.
No.
I mean, I've been pregnant 3 times and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
I know it's hard, extremely difficult to sit here and tell the story and talk about it, but you're doing it and you're honoring
Thank you.
Kaya girl.
My Kaya girl.
And maybe as unfortunate as it is for you, like maybe this was her legacy, like you said, and this is her legacy to bring maybe awareness about this rare genetic condition
or any rare genetic, just understanding our genetics in general, it's
and
not
how it can be tested for early in pregnancy if the mom or the parents request this type of test. Maybe even if it's not offered automatically by a
geneticist or a doctor or your OBGYN, or even if you're not family planning, right? Like sometimes the ideology of what we grow into as adults, right? Sometimes as it manifests disease later on in our lives, that is also genetic related. So even if you're not family planning, like having the power to understand what your body is capable of, why not? But it is a challenging and a scary conversation. Not many of us run to the doctor for like good conversation, right? And as you get older, the ideology that this is scary,
of course,
right? What your body is capable of in the sickness type way is scary.
So how would, because you've mentioned your husband a few times.
Yes.
So I know he was a huge support role for you. What are some ways that you think a husband should be able to support his wife during an experience like yours? Like,
I think just being present, I think that's the best thing my husband has done. It's not try to walk the path exactly like me, or me acknowledging that he won't walk the path exactly like we're not one another. We are our own individual people, experience this own individual experience, right? But then coming together under the shared grief proponent, it is a community of grief. I do know that while I love Kaya a very specific way, he loves Kaya a very specific way.
Right.
And so did my mother, and so did my mother-in-law, and so did my cousin, who is Kaya's godmother. And just that ideology that it goes so far beyond me, it's acknowledging the importance that shared grief is a thing, and we also have the ability to have our own individualized experience with one another, and holding space for each other, even if it's in silence sometimes, or him going on my 2-mile walks with me just because I say I need to go for a walk and I need to quiet my brain. Okay, let's
you've
go.
told me that's something that works great for you. You walk pretty much every night, right?
Yeah, I try, obviously this is still so fresh, with Kaya's passing being less than 3 months ago. It helps me kind of like simmer just naturally in life. We have, as human beings, we have 13 things going on at once, and it helps me close down like maybe 9 of those things, so that when I go into my bed, I'm able to rest and try my best to rest soundly. It doesn't happen every night, but that helps. Just giving myself the space to just be. Sometimes my walks are in silence. Sometimes my walks are in deep conversation. Sometimes my walks are singing.
So you're not necessarily listening to something. You're just
present.
Trying to just present, feel your feelings.
Yeah.
Process the feelings that maybe you were just kind of putting aside throughout the day because you're working and you have kids and you're doing all the things.
Correct is right.
So you're just using that moment just more for you to just
be
in that moment, feel your feelings.
Yeah. And if there's
Cry if you need to, pray, do whatever it is that your body, that you need to do in that moment.
correct. And if
That's
there's
so awesome.
no feelings to feel, then I'm
that's
just
okay
there.
too.
I'm just there.
That's okay
I'm
too.
just walking, and I think it's important to acknowledge that there will be days where you're just there. And I think that's the reality of any part of life. I think I've had, and I'm sure this has been said to you, where people are like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to you. And you're like, why not? As you process and as you walk the path, like, I get it, but why not?
Yeah.
I'm human too. And
Well, I think that's just their way of saying
Absolutely.
that they wish you didn't have to
absolutely,
go through all that pain.
absolutely. But I hope that in walking this path and showing people hard things happen to good people all the time. And I'm not calling myself good. I'm just using the verbiage that they use, right? You're a good person. Hard things happen to good people
All the time.
And I think if anything can be learned in my experience, it's just to offer those that you meet the grace and the kindness that they're probably a good person too. And they're probably experiencing something hard, because life is moment to moment. And I may not share my experience out loud, or they may share their experience out loud, but just offer that person the grace and the kindness that they're a human being like you too, and hard things may be happening to them.
Well, I don't think it's coincidence. I feel like God sends us these things
Yeah.
for a reason.
Absolutely.
And when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking
No,
about.
not that one.
Not that one.
Absolutely.
But I feel like God sends us these experiences for a reason, whether it's because you're supposed to carry this legacy, because he knew that you were going to be able to do the research that you needed to do so that you can become more educated in this genetic disease condition topic, and because you would be able to verbally express this and explain this to other people in a way that they would understand it, so that now maybe because you were going to be the one to be able to get a hold of that research
Researcher.
doctor
Right.
that now included Kaya's condition and her life into her research work, and then now that's going to trickle into other things. So it's not a coincidence. It's
Right.
for a specific reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think,
So I think it's beautiful that you're doing that, and that so early on, because it's very early. She passed only
yeah,
3 months away,
Yeah.
3 months ago. So, and I feel like you are so far along. Like people would say, oh, it's somebody that just their child passed only 3 months ago. I mean, obviously, maybe your story and your healing journey and your grief journey started
way before
way
that.
before she even
Yeah.
actually passed.
Absolutely. And
But
I
you're
think,
just so far along, and I look up to you so much because I see you and I'm like, 3 months after, I was not anywhere near where you are.
and I think, yes.
And I
Thank
know I
you.
may be maybe a little bit too soon for me to ask you this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Okay.
And I'm sure if I were to ask you the same question
A year from now.
3 months from now, or 6 months from now, or a year from now, your answer may change, and that's okay. But how, from just the short 3 months from since she passed, how have you been able to rediscover joy and happiness? Have you been able to feel happiness? Not all day, every day.
Yeah,
But
no.
have you been able to experience happiness and joy again? And what was that like?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the example that I shared earlier. The joy and grief are in the same room with one another consistently. And as is happiness, I think I clearly remember one day where I was being recognized at work, and I was being applauded and awarded. And one of my students was expressing such kind words, in the terms that they use, was giving me my flowers about an experience that they had with me where I was genuinely just being myself. And I received a call from the hospital that something strange was happening with Kaya's tests, and we had to run more tests and things of that nature. And joy and grief coexist consistently in life, right? Life spans across jumping both sides any moment. And I think to your point of what you expressed, yes, I did grieve my daughter a great deal while she was alive. I cry consistently, and it's not my strength, and it's for his honor and his glory. It's me leaning on God, that prayer where I ask God, strengthen me for after. It was intentional. It was with sincerity. It was, I don't know what's before me, but I know that I need to be okay.
And you are.
I need to be okay for my other two children. I need to be okay for my spouse. I need to be okay for my parents, for my in-laws. You know, I need to be okay for me, for my sibling, for those that love me, because there's parts.
And for Kaya too.
Yeah. And
because
for Kaya
she wants
too.
to see her mommy okay.
Absolutely.
She wants to see her mommy happy again.
Yeah. And I think that part of this path was one that I wrestled with daily, and acknowledging the days that I was not okay, right? I remember when we were supposed to go home at some point when Kaya was in the hospital, and something happened and it was a delay in going home. And I remember sitting across from a nurse, and I was just like ugly crying. And I was just like, I want to go home. Yeah. I want this experience to be done. I want to go home. I want to sit on the floor with my 3 children, and I want them to acknowledge one another, not in a hospital setting, at home. And there's power in normalcy. Mm-hmm. There's power in it. And I said, I want to go home. We didn't get to go home, but
not in that moment, maybe a little after.
But she just looked at me, and all she said was, I understand, because there's power in all of it. There's power in normalcy. There's power, and there's joy in all of it. There's grief in all of it. And that's the point. Like, it's not looking for the, I'm so elaborately happy moment. It's just acknowledging that in this moment, both coexist. There's joy in our conversation, and there's shared grief.
Yeah. And I think it's, to your point, is also whenever you do feel, because the joy and the sorrow are so interconnected. It's whenever you do feel that joy, but maybe something else is bringing, like maybe another, your son or your daughter that are still with you. Yeah. Maybe whenever that happens, it's just sitting in that joy and saying,
this is lovely.
This is nice.
Yes.
It's a nice break.
Lovely.
This is nice.
Exactly.
And just enjoying it, even if it's for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Because you deserve it.
Yeah, because somebody's gonna break something in a few minutes, and that's always
not like an arm, but like like un adorno.
Somebody's gonna need something in a few minutes, and that moment's gonna be over, and it's gonna be over. You know, it's like the mom who tells their kid, "I'm gonna go shower, just need a moment." Right? And 2 seconds later, everybody's in the bathroom with you having a conversation. You're like, I didn't really need that moment. It's fine.
Get out.
It's fine. This is fine. You know?
What encouragement would you give to a mom that, I know Kaya's genetic condition was extremely rare.
Yes.
But let's say that maybe their child is ill.
Yeah.
And maybe they have a different condition that is not necessarily that one, but they have a condition, and they're feeling that
overwhelmingness,
that desperation of they don't know what to do. How do you help your kid, like your baby? What would you say to that mom to maybe help them? Or maybe they're deep in grief because maybe their child didn't make it through this condition. What would you say to that mom to encourage her?
To the mommy that's bedside, you are amazing, and you are exactly who that baby needs. You know that baby, because even if you didn't carry that baby, even if you're an adoptive mother, even if you're whatever, a person who's choosing to be present, you are exactly who that child needs. Honor it. Allow yourself to feel all the feelings, to feel the desperation of like, save my baby. but then allow yourself to surrender to the ideology that healing may not look like what you think it may look like, and release it. And if you have to get up and do it again in 30 minutes, do it again and ask God to meet you where you're at
And to help you.
and to help you with the next moment, not the next day, not the next, 2 hours, the next moment. And to the mommy that lost her baby, I see you. I understand the brokenness that you feel when you see another baby that you assume might be around the same age as your baby, and you don't look at that mommy and baby and think, why me? You just look at that mommy and baby and think, there's joy there. There's happiness for them, and you sincerely want it for them, but you also want it for you. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling. Allow yourself to feel that feeling of grief, of loss, but then allow yourself to feel the moment of joy. Your grieving doesn't have to look like my grieving. There are mothers who grieve for longer periods of time, who've known their children for less time than I knew Kaya in this physical world. And there are mothers who lose adult children. At the end of the day, they're all our babies, right?
Yeah.
And they grieve differently too. All of it is okay. It is yours. It is no one to define how you do it. No one can tell you, oh, today you need to do ABC and you need to do it this way. No, it is yours. It is yours to deal with. It is yours. And again, just ask God to meet you where you at. There's no roadmap to any of this. There's books, which are great, but I haven't read any. But,
I read a few that didn't help much.
There's books, but those are those people's experiences. And you may pick up some tools in there that will help you. And I'm not turning anyone away from it, but allow yourself to feel all the feelings. Grieve in the sense, in the direction that you need to, in the timing that you need, and then
Yeah. And I would also say definitely lean on God.
yeah.
Ask him for help, because you have to ask. But I like what you said, ask for that help in the next moment.
Yeah.
Ask for his guidance. And maybe, like you said, maybe the healing for the baby or the child, it isn't coming in the way that you would
think.
want, but just ask for his guidance, ask for God's help to carry you through these moments, and know that God is there with you. Even though it may feel like he's not, he definitely is. And you just have to ask him to carry you, seek God, and he will show up in one way, shape, or another. It may not be the way that we would hope, but that doesn't mean that he's not there.
Absolutely. And the guilt that comes with, we're conditioned to be like, you can't X, Y. You can't envision, or you shouldn't miss your child because they've gone on to a better place, or all these other things that people say slyly, you can still miss your child and still believe in a merciful God. You can still miss your child and believe that there's still joy left in your life on this path from God. Like, one doesn't stop the other.
Definitely.
And I'm grateful that Kaya is healed. She is healed, and she's in eternity, and she's, like I said, she's simply just gone ahead of me. She hasn't left me.
Exactly.
But she's
100%.
healthy, she's whole, and she's able. Things she wasn't able to do here, she's able to do there.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're so brave. I don't think I could have sat 3 months after my baby passed and told his story. And you definitely have. And I'm so proud of you for not only telling her story, but wanting to spread, the word about this rare genetic condition. For showing up for her, for honoring Kaya and her strength and her little warrior self.
Yes.
But also for seeking help, number one, to heal yourself. I'm proud of you for looking for different ways to find joy and to enjoy the bits and pieces of joy whenever they do come.
Absolutely.
And it will get easier. I will tell you that. It gets easier. We never forget them. They're always with us. But make it a point to remember her with happiness, because
Absolutely.
one day you're going to remember her and you're just going to keep smiling.
Absolutely.
And I know it's maybe too early for that now, but one day it will happen.
Amen.
And it's such a beautiful feeling, because then God just allows you to have all of these memories of them
Of joy. Yeah.
and just smile and feel happiness and not cry. And you're like, oh, I thought of them and I didn't cry today.
Right.
That's a win, you
Yeah.
know, and see that. So I'm very proud of you for how far you've come in just these short 3 months.
That's
And I pray that you can get her legacy out there and tell more people about this rare condition, so that something could be done to change.
Yeah,
system.
I'm hoping that, my advocating goes to the right people, and we could talk more in relation to like how genetic testing can be accessible to people, not even in relation to just family planning. And, you shared that you feel that I'm strong, and I'm not. I'm weak.
No,
I'm feeble.
You're
but,
not.
But God is within me.
God is holding you.
And that is what helps
you're-
me. And that is the strength that I get. And
And I know you may feel weak, but you're not.
yeah,
And you're good. He's got you.
absolutely.
There's a reason for this happening. He has a bigger purpose than even you or I.
Could ever define.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's going to be good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for watching. Don't remember to like and subscribe. And if you know a mom that has experienced a loss of her child, please share this podcast with her so that we can show her that hope is still here. Hope is possible. Healing is possible, even in the midst of very deep sorrow. Stay tuned. Stay blessed.